Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar this evening. We want to give people a couple more moments to join us. So maybe we could just do a quick sound check to make sure that everyone can hear us loud and clear. If you just type into the questions box where it is that you're tuning in from this evening so that we can see that you can all hear us loud and clear. Fantastic. So we have people from Albury and Melbourne, Upper Blue Mountains, Toongabbie. Where else are people dialing in from this evening? Sunshine Coast. Oh, we're all over Australia. That's fantastic. Dunedin, New Zealand, all over the world, we'll say. My name's Kate Vandervoort, and I'm the technologist and the host for the webinar this evening. Shortly I'll be introducing Petrea and Susie, who will be having a conversation this evening about living beyond expectations. But for a moment I just wanted to take you through a couple of quick housekeeping items which will help to make your webinar as successful as possible. So if you could please shut down all other browsers, documents or programs on your computer, that'll help make the quality of the webinar better. Please ensure that your speakers are turned on and the volume's up high. You can type questions as we go in the box on the lower right hand corner. We just ask if you could please keep them short and relevant to what we're speaking about. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions, however we don't always get to all of them. If you have any trouble with the audio on the webinar, you can switch to the telephone, and the settings are in the top right hand corner. That will provide you with a local call number. And just one other thing to mention, if it does drop out intermittently, it's just a function of internet connections. So by all means, if it drops out for more than a few seconds, feel free to let me know. However, often people's internets kind of come and go a little bit, just so that you're aware of that. So this evening will be a conversation between Petrea and the wonderful Susie Cameron, who we also have on the line. And Susie is the author of the Small Fry series of books for children and has joined us this year at the Quest for Life Foundation as our Business Development Manager, and it's really wonderful to have her involved with our webinar this evening. So welcome, Susie and Petrea.
Oh, thank you so much, Kate. And welcome to everybody listening in this evening. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I'm going to go straight in and introduce the very wonderful Petrea King. 27 years ago, Petrea was given 3 months to live. Some doctors still tell people how long they think a person has to live. It can be very difficult to shift your thinking once you've been told a date or a time frame for your life. Some of us believe that because our parents died at a particular age, that we're destined to die then as well. Some of us have thought ever since we were quite young that we would die by a certain age. So tonight we're going to talk about how we might live beyond our doctors and sometimes even our own expectations. We'd love for you to send in your questions, as Kate's already mentioned, so that we can incorporate them into tonight's discussions. Petrea, as some of you may know, has worked with thousands of people with cancer, AIDS, neurological, and many other illnesses since her own unexpected recovery from leukemia back in 1984. So welcome, Petrea.
Hi, Susie. It's lovely to be with you this evening and to be with everyone. So welcome to everyone who's with us tonight.
Absolutely. So it would seem quite a challenge, Petrea, when an authority figure like a specialist or a GP tells us that we have a fairly short time to live. How then do we free ourselves from fear of such a prognosis?
Well, it's, you know, most people in the first 6 to 8 weeks are really in a shock. For me, I thought any moment I'm going to wake up from this nightmare. Other times I felt like it was happening to somebody else. I felt like I was outside of my body. And it's important to remember that if they do your time frame around your illness, they're only ever talking about a statistical group of people. And no individual is a group. Each person is a unique individual, and no one knows exactly what it is that you might bring to the circumstance that you're in. I imagine some of our participants this evening on the webinar may have been given a time frame for their own illness, and I know it can be very difficult to let go that kind of number that you might have in your head. But it is important to remember, if you think right back to at school, the bell curve, where there was the big average in the middle, and of course there will be some people who may die much more quickly than others because they have a whole range of other health issues or other things going on in their life. And then at the far end of the bell curve, there are always those few weirdos who don't die on time with that average group. So I know it's very difficult when you've been told a time frame to liberate yourself from the fear of imposing that statistical group number on yourself. And the thing is, if we believe something's impossible, then we're probably right. And that's why it is important to do whatever you need to do. Maybe you need to weep about the situation that you're in. You need to rail at it. You need to talk about it, write about it. Do something so that you can finally get to that place where this did happen, this diagnosis did happen, and it happened to me. And given that I'm a person in this circumstance, what is it that I'm going to do about the fact that I'm in this situation? And once we get to that place, then a whole avenue of possibilities open up. Once we get to a place of acceptance and we realize that what I can change is my attitude, I may want to explore some of those things that we'll talk about tonight, meditation and mindfulness, diet and nutrition, what we can do as far as our lifestyle choices are concerned. There's a whole host of things that people can actually bring to the situation that they're in.
It really still must be a challenge to move past that fear and embrace the situation as a challenge.
Well, it is. None of this is easy, but you know, this is definitely a journey worth taking because the alternative is not that good. I know when I was told that I had 3 months to live, my brother had not long taken his own life, so I was quite bereft at the time of my own diagnosis, and my very first reaction was relief because I was really feeling so overwhelmed by life at that point in time, and also really grief-stricken. But I thought at one stage, maybe if I can't control my life, maybe I can control my death. And I literally, by this time I was bedridden, and my mum was helping me to get dressed and washed and showered, and I was used to washing and drying my own children, and suddenly I was being looked after by my parents and trying to be really grateful for that, but also really resenting the fact that I couldn't even look after myself, let alone my own children. And I thought, well, maybe if I can't control my life, maybe I can control my death. And so every day I would practice letting go, letting go, letting go. Oh, gosh, I'm still here. And after a while, of course, it got pretty boring to be focusing on death all the time. And I realized that what I did have was this moment. And if I attended to this moment and really brought my mind to rest, so it was free of the despair, free of the hopelessness and helplessness that I was feeling, then, and I could accept where I was, then that was a really good place to start. And so rather than resisting the fear or saying I shouldn't have it, or was really just to embrace the fear, feel it, and allow myself to have whatever the feelings were that I was experiencing, and then come back to the present moment. And that was, for me, the most effective way to really get to that place of taking on board what really had happened to me.
Such a journey, isn't it? Would you say, Petrea, then that, you know, acceptance might be the first step?
Yes, I think it's the first step, and it's an empowering place to get to. You know, once you say, okay, this is where I'm at, then we can begin to look at what am I going to do about the fact that I'm in this situation. And rather than just, you know, trying to fit in a bit of cancer on the side or a bit of an illness on the side and keeping on, powering on as a way of defending ourselves against having the diagnosis, it's really to embrace it and to give it the time that we might need to. We may need to begin to consult with people. We may need to take some quiet time, a bit of silence, and withdraw for a while until we get to that place of acceptance. But finally we get to a place where we feel, okay, bring it on. What do I need to do now that I'm in this circumstance? What can I do to maximize my potential for healing within the circumstance that I'm in?
So are you actually saying that we can cure ourselves of these diseases?
You know, that's a really tricky question because at Quest we don't focus on curing bodies at all. Curing is always about the body, and healing is more about the spirit, is more about our emotional, psychological state, and that's what we really focus on in our programs, is how can you create the most ideal environment in which your body can do whatever healing is possible, given that you're in the circumstance that you are. So my question to people is always, what is it that stands in the way of you being at peace? And sometimes that's a physical symptom, and you may very well have to really look at the physical symptoms. Maybe there's diarrhea or nausea or night sweats or hot flushes or pain or whatever it might be. So let's use diet and complementary therapies and medical therapies, whatever we need to get to a place where the body is feeling as comfortable as possible. Because it's very hard really to talk about peace of mind until you've got peace of body. And so we always look at how can we bring the physical body to as much peace and rest as possible. So we focus on issues like sleep, because obviously if you're not sleeping well, it's going to be very difficult for your body to do whatever healing it might need to do. Obviously, if you're unable to digest the food that you're eating because you have an illness that involves the digestive tract, then you may need to look at, does this person need digestive enzymes? Do they need to rebuild their gut bacteria? Because you can eat the best diet in the world, but if you don't have the gut bacteria to assimilate it, then it's not going to do you so much good. So there are a lot of very practical things you can look at to bring about a healing environment for the body. And then, of course, we need to focus on the mind, because the mind can create absolute havoc for us. And when it projects all of its worries and fears and anxieties and all the things that might happen, could happen, and probably won't happen into the future, or we're caught up in this isn't fair, it shouldn't have happened, I don't deserve this, I'm a really nice person, how come it didn't happen to someone else? When we're caught up in the past or in the future, we squander all of the possibilities that are there in the present. But even worse than that, we produce a physiology in our body that's in accord with wherever our consciousness is caught up. So if it's caught up in helplessness, powerlessness, fear, anxiety, fretting, or resenting, or blaming, or shaming, or feeling bitter about things from the past, that's as much a physiology within your body as it is a state of mind. And it's not a state of mind that's conducive to healing. So we do need to focus on bringing the mind to rest on a regular basis. And we also need to focus on what are the feelings that we're experiencing, and how can we create a safe environment in which those feelings can be expressed in a healthy kind of a way, in a way that doesn't wound yourself or wound anybody else. And once we get to that real place of acceptance, we can begin looking at all of these physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects that might be holding a key to the body's ability to heal itself. So rather than, we need to remember the body has this amazing innate wisdom about how to heal itself. When you cut yourself, you don't think, gosh, how am I going to get fibrin and collagen and white blood cells to the wound? You might need to clean the wound, but your body has this innate knowledge about how to bring about re-establishing the harmony and the integrity of the body. And so it's really looking at how do we create an environment in which our bodies can remember and put in place their own healing mechanisms so that we work in conjunction with whatever the treatments might be, that either medical or complementary, that we might be utilising to give our bodies the very best opportunity for healing.
So can you share with us then how we do create this environment in which healing can take place that gives our bodies the very best opportunity to achieve a remarkable healing? Some people have achieved the most unexpected of recoveries. What did they do?
Yes. Well, it's a funny thing, because when we're in this state of having a serious illness, we're always looking for what we can do that's going to make a difference. And for those callers that we have with us tonight who are familiar with our webinars, they'll be very familiar with the 4 C's that we always talk about, which are really about peace of mind in a very, very practical way. And the interesting thing is, when you look at people who have remarkable remissions, or because in the tens of thousands of people that we've seen over the last 27 years through our programs or through counselling, many of those people would certainly have had an improved quality of life. In fact, I'd say all of them had an improved quality of life. And when you have a good quality of life, that means every day you find is a meaningful day, that you have skills and techniques to bring your mind to rest, where you feel good about the foods that you're eating and that they make sense to you and that your body can assimilate them, when you're sleeping well, when you're surrounded with loving connections with people, all of these things, when you're able to let go of what happened in the past, and that liberates you so that you can focus more on living in the present. It's these more subtle areas of healing that are truly the most powerful arenas for people to focus on. And that's why it's always a very individual path. So I've known people who've taken themselves away from a very hectic and stressful lifestyle and taken up painting, and who are still painting 15 years after they were meant to have died. I've known other people who had a very stressful shops, and he sold all of his shops and decided on meditation and a diet that was going to work for him, and he semi-retired, and that's 26 years ago, and from when he was given 3 months to live. So there are many, many stories like this, but it's not one pathway that people take. So it's really about finding the voice of your spirit, the purpose of your life, why on the planet, and are you living the life you came here to live, and if not, why not, and what is it you'll do about that, and really addressing those questions in a very deep way. Now, having said that, which might not sound terribly practical to people, because it is very individual, and that's why in our programs and certainly in my books it talks much more about how to get in touch with your own individual path. But of course there are some universal things that are very useful for people to focus on as well, including our nutrition and our lifestyle choices. One of the other greatest allies in this whole journey of healing too, though, is access to our intuition. And your intuition is that still small voice that knows and doesn't think. So that means we need a quiet mind, because if the mind is forever churning into the future or into the past, then you can't hear your intuition. And your intuition, and I'm not sure if you're allowed to say this on the webinar, but one word for it sometimes is your shit detector, because you really need to have that part of you on when you're with a doctor or with a therapist or a counsellor or thinking about a program or anything. Have that part of you, does this feel right for me? Rather than thinking that you've got to jump on everybody else's bandwagon because you're fearful. So if we can bring the mind to rest on a daily basis, then we can begin to feel what's right for us rather than that process of thinking all the time, should I do this, will I do that, can I do this? Whereas your intuition tends to speak sometimes in nudges. For some people it comes in dreams. Some people just have a feeling, and we often say, oh, it's gut feeling. And we do that because next to your brain, your gut secretes the most chemicals of your emotions. So we often do literally feel it in the gut. And it's really important that we learn to listen to that.
So you mentioned intuition. I'm going to ask you to go back to that for a minute. What part does intuition play, and how can you tell the difference between your intuition and your fears?
That's particularly if you're new to listening to your intuition, and it can be a very new concept for some people. It's probably the least acknowledged but our greatest aspect, our intuition. And it's really about finding the voice of the non-physical world, even though your intuition often does deliver very tangible and physical instructions. If we can train ourselves, though, to discern the voice of our own intuition, it can actually provide us with guidance in every moment of our lives. And when your fears tend to cause you to contract, to become smaller, to become a smaller version. Intuition often leads you into the grandest version of yourself. And that can be a little bit scary because we're leaving behind perhaps what was familiar. And it's good to remember that any decent adventure is always a little bit scary and a little bit exciting. And that's when we're leaving behind what's familiar and we're stepping into a new way of doing things, where we might be taking some risks in perhaps exposing some of our vulnerabilities. We might be asking for help, for instance, which for many people is a completely new avenue to explore, that they've always been the one who helps everybody else. And to have someone say, I need a hug, or it would be really helpful for me if you were able to pick the kids up after school, or to take home this basket of washing and bring it back ironed. You know, for some people, saying something like that is so scary because they've never asked for help in their entire life. So I'm not saying that intuition isn't sometimes a little bit fearful as well, but it always leads us into the larger part of ourselves, whereas the voice of our fears tend to cause us to contract and close down. And each person will be different. Some will feel it as a nudge or a hunch. Some people will get messages through their dreams. Sometimes people just come into your life completely unannounced, and you just have an intuitive sense that it's exactly what you need at that person at that time. That person is exactly the person that you need in your life. And of course, sometimes too, when you're dealing with illness, all of your friends that you thought were going to be there for you actually can't be there. And that's another really big challenge for a lot of people. And sometimes completely unexpected people come into your life, and that is something that becomes very, very precious. And I think also too, many people have had a sense that something's not right in their body long before there was any clinical sign of that. And indeed, I've known many women in particular who've been told that they were hypochondriacs, or that, you know, there was nothing wrong with them and they ought to get on with their lives or whatever, and they've just known at some intuitive level that something's not right and it needs further investigation. And I'd encourage people always to follow the voice of their intuition.
One of the things that people tend to focus a lot on when they're dealing with a serious illness is diet. And yet there seems to be so much conflicting information about what is a good diet. Are you able to give us some guidance in this very confusing area?
It is a confusing area because there are so many experts out there who all have an opinion about what we should do. So I'm going to add mine to that as well, I'm afraid. There are some very, very clear and obvious ones that we all need to really think about, whether we have an illness or not. I think sugar is probably one of the most diabolical substances on the planet. It is a shocker, and indeed is more addictive than cocaine, which was borne out in research from in 2007. People found it more difficult to give up sugar than to give up cocaine. So it shows us what an addictive substance it is. And remember, now we're eating over 70 kilograms of sugar per annum, when 100 years ago the average Australian ate half a kilogram of sugar per annum. So sugar is one that I would definitely encourage people to leave out, regardless of whatever illness they might have. And any of the processed foods, so white flour that's been heavily processed just to get it down to the very bare bones as far as its nutritional value is concerned. And of course any foods then that contain white flour, and certainly trans fatty acids, which are being phased out gradually, but they're in a lot of cake mixes and pikelet mixes and takeaway foods and potato crisps. And so it's a very good idea to leave out trans fatty acids altogether and make sure that you're having the really healthy oils in your diet, like olive oil or any of the cold-pressed oils. There are lots of those available now. Refined salt is another really good one to leave out of your diet altogether, and replace it with either a Himalayan salt or a sea salt, or there are many. We have some fabulous Australian salts that come from our ancient salt pans that have all of the 84 minerals that you require in your body. You know, we all are made up of these minerals in our body, and if you have one of the natural salts rather than a refined salt, then you're replacing those minerals in your own body. I think milk is another good food to leave out altogether, and I know we used to have those ads, live on milk, and of course those were just being promoted by the dairy industry. Human beings are the only animals on the planet that continue drinking milk after they're weaned, and milk is a fantastic food for baby animals, and it helps us to lay down lots of calcium and bone because babies are growing rapidly, but as adults we're not doing that. So I think milk is another good food to leave out, and if you are going to have milk in your diet, then think about coconut milk, rice milk, and maybe if you want to have cow's milk, then have it in the form of yogurt, so that it's already pre-digested. And yogurt has some really good benefits for people, particularly after antibiotic treatment or chemotherapy. And in fact, many drugs strip the gut from good, healthy bacteria. So yogurt can be a very good way of replacing gut bacteria. And sometimes just taking capsules to do that as well can work very effectively. And things, of course, like preservatives and colorings and flavorings and MSG and all of the additives that they put into food, either to preserve them, to change the flavoring of them or the coloring of them. So that's just a rough kind of guideline of eliminating sugar, white flour, processed foods, the trans fatty acids, refined salt, milk, those chemical additives that are put into food to either preserve them or to change their appearance or to change their flavour. And for a lot of people too, they'll really benefit from working with someone who can tailor a diet to their particular circumstances. Obviously, the person who might have had their stomach removed, cancer, is going to require a very different diet from someone who has had breast cancer. You know, those are obvious things. But even people who've had their stomach removed, there's a great deal that can be done in a healthy diet in a way that's now going to be suitable for that particular body. And so that's why it's useful often to work with someone who can tailor a diet to your particular circumstance so that you make sure you have sufficient gastric enzymes, pancreatic enzymes, and the gut bacteria so that and there are some foods that are difficult to digest. And for instance, if you have an illness that involves the digestive tract, then you really need to educate yourself the kinds of foods that will now work in your particular digestive system. You, of course, need to be on a gluten-free diet or maybe lactose intolerant. So these are all things that need to be taken into account. It's also useful, of course, to have good, pure water. Water that's been filtered so that it's really free of a lot of the chemical additives that come through our tap water. And, of course, eating mindfully when you do sit, you know, just bring yourself into the present moment before you even begin to eat a meal, and just focus on your breathing so that you bring yourself to rest, and then eat mindfully, really chewing your food. And the old naturopaths used to say, drink your food and chew your juices, that we need to chew our food to the point where we can drink it, and that even our drinks, we need to chew them so that we mix them with saliva thoroughly, because the first stage of digestion takes place with a little enzyme in your saliva, and if you're swallowing your food too quickly, then you miss out on that first stage, which is particularly important when it comes to the starches in your diet.
Mm. Petrea, we've actually had a question through from Jackie asking if soy milk is okay.
Look, different kinds of soy milk, and I think the ones we're using at the centre at the moment is Vitasoy, and there's another one as well which I can't think of. It's a fairly new one. I have isolates in them, and some of the soy milks are terrific. Some of them are not so good. So maybe again consult with your naturopath or the health food store owner which ones are the ones that are free of isolates that you can recommend. But soy milk is okay to have, definitely. Sheep's milk is actually really delicious and very easy for our bodies to digest, because sheep are more our size than goats, of course. So goat's milk needs to be really fresh so that it doesn't taste too goaty. But sheep's milk is also a very, very good food for human beings, because sheep is more our body weight and easy for us to digest, whereas cows tend to form really curds in the stomach that are very hard for our bodies to break down.
So what other things are useful when we're talking about physical healing?
Well, paradoxically, exercise is one of the things that's really helpful when we're dealing with illness. And of course, if you're feeling ill, exercise may not be exactly what you're feeling like. So I've known people who are even bedridden, but who still find that having someone take their arms, legs, body through a range of movements tremendously helpful, because our bodies really are a series of pumps. And if we're completely inert or stationary or sedentary, then all of those fantastic pumps that keep our fluids in the body moving around so that we both circulate the nutrients, but we also can eliminate the toxins. So exercise is tremendously important, and indeed in many of the cancers, exercise is as valuable as chemotherapy, which is really quite extraordinary. But the research absolutely points exactly to that exercise is tremendously important, because then you're putting your body appropriately in a way that's going to work for you, which is why it's important to find exercise that is appropriate for you. You might find it better off in water, perhaps, rather than doing long walks or anything that's too exhausting. And of course, then there are all the other forms of exercise, like gentle stretches and massage if we're unwell. Is really helpful, again, to help with the circulation and vaccination, because that stimulates your lymphatic system. It's good to sit out in the early morning sunshine, although it's getting a little bit nippy in Bundanoon for that. But for those who are in a position to still get some of that early morning sunshine on the skin is very, very beneficial for our bodies. We've been a bit too protected from sunshine, and of course Australians are really lacking now across the board in vitamin D, because we've all been covering up and using sunscreen and so on. Eliminating all of the chemicals out of your kitchen cupboards, out of your bathroom, I think is another tremendously important area. So that you're in an environment that is as free of toxicity as possible. Remember that 60% of whatever you put onto your skin, or at least whatever you put onto your skin, your body absorbs 60% of that into your body. So I would get rid of any creams or deodorants or makeup or anything that has any of the chemicals in it that are just going to interfere with the natural healing processes within your own body, and replace the chemicals might be in your cleaning cupboards or in your bathroom cupboards. Get rid of as much of those as possible so that your body is free of all of this toxicity. You know, we've got to a point now where the average US baby born today has up to 200 persistent chemicals in its cord blood. And this is a terrible tragedy, because none of these chemicals were ever designed for the human body, and we all need to really look at how we can reduce the chemicals that we have in our environment. And even just connecting with the earth. You know, where human beings have an electromagnetic field that stems from the heart. And when we literally put our feet on the earth and connect with the magnetic field of the earth, that too is very, very beneficial for the body. And you'll find even when you stand on cold earth, in a very short period of time, you'll feel the warmth between your feet and the earth. And as you connect into that electromagnetic field of the earth. So these are very simple measures that are within our ability and within our cost, and breathing, of course, is always tremendously important too, that we just deepen the down into the belly rather than just breathing in that more superficial way in the upper part of our chest. Maybe some gentle yoga so that you find a way of moving the energy around in your body in a way that's going to be both gentle if you're unwell, but really beneficial for you as well.
Thank you for that. Are there any other areas worth exploring when you're dealing with an illness?
Oh, well, of course, we would certainly encourage people to come join us on a program. You know, the Quest for Life program is full of resources that it can be really tailored to the individuals who are present. So we go into all of the things that we're talking about tonight in much, much greater depth, so that people leave the program feeling very well educated about what they need to do in their life to create an environment for healing, physical healing, but also coming to emotional and mental peace and really reconnecting with our spirit and living the life that we came here to live. All of our programs, too, are based very much on the premise that each person has their own best answer. But sometimes we need a safe environment in which we can begin to discover what our own best answer might be. And that will be different, of course, for each person. And too, that healing happens in those very subtle areas like community. What we're feeling is tremendously important. What you hold in your consciousness is delivered to every cell of your body via the receptor sites on the surface of the cell, according to what it is that you're holding in your consciousness. And you know, these neurotransmitters and the receptor sites that they engage with are a very potent area for healing in our bodies. We know a fantastic little chemical, anandamide, when it locks on to a cannabinoid receptor site, which is part of the endocannabinoid system of the body, it literally gives a chemical message to the interior of the cell that tells the cell to optimize its healing potential. You know, that's a fantastic, amazing chemical that we all produce in our own bodies. And most cells of your body have a receptor site waiting for that one little chemical, that one little hormone that's part of your endocannabinoid system in the body for healing. And if we're walking around feeling contented, feeling engaged, feeling our life has meaning, feeling at peace with ourselves, at peace with the world, that's when we begin to produce these chemicals that are so potent for our healing. So we know that people produce anandamide when they exercise. That's anandamide is that runner's high that people get when they break through that, usually after about 30 minutes, and then they break through that level, and then there's this feeling of exhilaration, this feeling that we could run forever. That's when our body is flooded with anandamide. And likewise, we know that when we wire up Buddhist monks and measure what's happening for them when they meditate, they too are producing bucket loads of anandamide at that time. And these chemicals are tremendously healing and potent. And of course, producing powerlessness and feeling trapped, then we're not secreting anandamide. And if you look at the word anandamide, it is a Sanskrit word meaning bliss. And it's literally known as the bliss hormone in your body. And it's actually a different family of hormones from your opiates that you secrete in your body. And anandamide is very much involved in self-healing. So we need to really be aware of these feelings that we're having and finding ways of embracing them, healing them in ways that are healthy for us, so that we don't submerge these feelings or suppress them where they come out in inappropriate or unhelpful ways when we're feeling frustrated and upset and so on. So, you know, there are all those other wonderful little chemicals like oxytocin, which is, we secrete, if someone hugs us, we secrete oxytocin. When someone touches us, when we have a massage, we secrete lots of oxytocin. And these chemicals are, again, immune enhancers. They directly affect our health. So there's a tremendous amount that we can do, both from those physical things outside, like diet and connecting with the earth and fresh water and getting rid of all of the chemicals out of our environment. But the internal environment of the body is equally important, where we really have an awareness about our feelings, express them in healthy ways, don't resist them, and really concentrate on those activities like meditation and mindfulness that bring us into the present moment, where we begin to secrete these chemicals of oxytocin and anandamide and the endorphins and so on.
So there really does seem to be, you know, a great deal that we can do in addition to whatever we might be doing medically to help ourselves. Do you have any parting advice that you can provide for listeners on the webinar who are starting out on this path to their own healing?
Well, you know, we're all far, far more powerful than we might believe. Many of us have got stuck with perhaps not living the life we came here to live. We may have got a little bit weighed down because of our responsibilities, or things might just have become habitual in our life. Maybe our relationships have fallen into patterns that are no longer working for us. Maybe we're in a career where we really have got the juice out of that career and it really is time for us to move on, but we stay stuck in it because we think, oh, well, it pays the rent, and what would I do if I didn't do this? And so we really need to find that deep excitement about our life. Are we living the life we came here to live? So I think getting passionate about our life is tremendously important, and one of the great antidotes to illness, to feel like I'm too busy living the life I came here to live, and sending that as a chemical message into your body so that your body does its very best to serve the consciousness that enlivens it. You know, you are not your body, you have a body, and so the important thing really is to be on track, living the life that you want to live, so that your body serves the consciousness, because it's one of the main journeys of our own lives, a journey towards greater peace and making a contribution on the planet that can only be made by each one of us. And when we're living in accordance with our spirit, that's exactly when our body does its very darndest to provide an environment for physical healing. Remember, too, that you're never alone, and we certainly always look forward to your company, either through these webinars or through a program at our centre in Bundanoon. You're also always very welcome to connect with us through Facebook or through our Quest blogs, because our facilitators often write really pithy and relevant comments about life. And it's good to feel that you're in good company with other people who are all endeavouring to put these same things into practice. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to call this for a few people to ask some questions that we can address at the end of the webinar. And I think, too, to cultivate faith that everything is unfolding perfectly. And that's a really hard one to get when you're feeling that everything's falling apart, because you really, to see that there's a silver lining is sometimes very difficult when you're in pain or when you've had so many losses. So I think all of these things can help to really bring us in alignment with our own spirit, so that we feel that we are living the life that we came here to live. I know
there's actually one of our listeners, Petrea, has just come in saying that they love the expression, it's never too late to be what we came here to be.
Exactly, exactly. And you know, it's often these very things that happen unexpectedly that stop us in our tracks, that cause us to go off in completely new directions that we may never have discovered otherwise. Sometimes we're so caught up in the mediocrity of our life that we don't take the risk, we don't see the potential within ourselves, we don't live with passion until something stops us in our tracks and gives us the impetus to get to that place where we say, that's it, something has to change and it's me. And once we get to that place, the whole universe will conspire to bring about the change that we desire. So the more we can align ourselves with the feelings of wellness, rather than that self-talk that might say, I feel so sick, I feel unwell. Instead of that, find that place within yourself where you can feel at peace and feel that wellness, and imagine that wellness spreading out throughout the whole of your body, and that practice of gratitude for what is, rather than wanting things to be different from how they are. The more we can do all of that, the more we're working in accordance with all of the healing mechanisms within our own bodies. And we're far, far more powerful than we can even imagine. And that's the power that we need to really plug into. And of course, some people, I imagine we've got some people on the phone with us tonight or through the webinar tonight who have cancer, and the two books of both Quest for Life and Spirited Women for women with breast cancer, Quest for Life for life-threatening cancer and other chronic and serious illnesses, have a wealth of practical information about managing side effects and symptoms, and meditation, and dealing with pain, and dealing with communication within families, and so on. So those are some other resources that people might want to have a look at on the website that they might find of benefit as well.
Well, thank you so much, Petrea. We actually don't have any other questions that have come through. I guess if anybody wants to put one last one in, go hit the keyboard now. Otherwise, it's a very, very huge thank you to you, Petrea, just for your always generous wisdom to be shared with everybody. And I will hand over to Kate to wind up. And thank you, Kate, for being the technology producer extraordinaire on the other end.
Thank you so much, Susie. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we wish all of our listeners well this evening.
Thank you very much, Susie and Petrea. A wonderful array of really practical tools and tips and information for everyone there. I wanted to take just a moment as we wrap up just to let you know about the residential programs that we have available in the Southern Highlands, as Petrea spoke about. There's certainly more information about those on our website, and Suzanne is always very happy to speak with people on the phone about your own individual circumstances. We did have a couple of questions come through that were particular to people's own circumstances, and I've responded to those personally, but I really encourage you to speak to Suzanne in the office. And just to let you know also that we have financial subsidies available through New South Wales Health. So we really endeavour to turn no one away on financial grounds. So please don't let finances be a reason to stop you making touch with us and seeing whether a program might be suitable. We also conduct community programs around the country. Both Petrea does that as well as our other facilitators. So we are available to come into communities or other organisations to run programs, as well as in the corporate sector. As Petrea mentioned, there are some books that might be particularly applicable for people who are on the webinar this evening, and there's a whole range of books and CDs that are available on the website. And we also have a set of resources that have launched recently around resilience, and they were done particularly for people who were in flood-affected areas, but they're very pertinent to anyone that's dealing with a significant challenge in their life. We really encourage you to connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and through our blog, as Petrea mentioned, and those URLs are there. We have thriving communities online, and we love hearing from people and sharing more information and great articles and snippets of inspiration for people through our social media channels. Just to let you know about some upcoming events, we have a free webinar which is an introduction to Quest for Life coming up on Wednesday the 23rd of May. So by all means, if you have questions about programs before then, please call the office, but you may also like to participate in that. We go through each of the programs and what their content is, as well as show you pictures of the centre and give you a real feel for how our programs work. We also have Meditate for Life, which is coming up on the 28th of May, and that's 8 evenings in Sydney. So for people who'd like a taste of Quest before coming on a program, or would just like to learn to meditate, or for those who already have an established practice, it's lovely to get together with like-minded people on a regular basis. We also have the next Quest for Life program, which is for people with cancer or other serious illness. That's a residential program that's happening from the 7th to the 11th of June. So for more information about any of those, you're welcome to visit our website, questforlife.com.au, or to phone the centre, and the number is there on your screen. So thank you very much, everyone, for being with us this evening. We look forward to our paths crossing with you again soon. Have a lovely evening.